Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking something absolutely wild. One of the most fascinating, esoteric, and highly conceptual frameworks we have ever encountered. We're talking about the Gnosis topological programming language. Let's just dive right into the absolute bleeding edge of formal logic, shall we?
So right off the bat, the big question is, how on earth do you decode a 688-file topological programming universe without, getting completely lost in the lore? Because this isn't just your standard code repository. No, it's an entire mathematical and philosophical architecture. To avoid getting totally overwhelmed, we're going to take a macro to micro approach. First, we'll zoom way out to look at the sheer scale of the entire ledger. Then, we're going to pick just one single random file and go incredibly deep under the microscope.
And when I say sheer scale, I mean it. Just look at this number, 688. The Gnosis project is this massive append-only ledger of what it calls Boolean mathematics, generated back in May of 2026. It contains exactly 688 files. That is 688 distinct, formally verified modules that map out a completely unique system of logic. The scale here is literally awe-inspiring. Every single one of these files interconnects, building this massive, rigorous topological manifold.
To really get a feel for this, just notice the naming conventions of the files living inside this ledger. You've got Achilles tortoise ladder sitting right next to black hole void singularity and God formula quine. And if you scroll a bit further down, you hit things like astrophysical projection, cancer confinement, and ant colony collective intelligence. It's just a totally fascinating mix. It tells us right away this isn't standard software engineering. This manifold is actively trying to bridge biology, classical paradoxes, astrophysics, and formal computer logic all into one unified, mathematically proven framework.
Okay, let's drop our pace for a second and pivot sharply. Instead of trying to wrap our heads around the vast 688-file universe, we're picking one random file to go deep into. Specifically, we're looking at algorithmic exploitation of 5forces.lean. Written in the Lean 4 programming language, this file has a very specific mission: to design algorithms that exploit 5-force topology for optimal computation. We're going to extract the core logic right from this file so we can really understand how the whole Gnosis framework ticks.
According to the text in this file, the universe operates on 5 fundamental forces. Ready? 1. Fork. 2. Race. 3. Fold. 4. Vent. And 5. Interfere. The code cleanly maps out these forces as the absolute bedrock of its reality. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, wait, this sounds a lot like physics, well, you are definitely on the right track. But the real genius of Gnosis is how it completely reinterprets these physical concepts.
And that brings us to the crucial point, captured perfectly in this quote straight from the source code. It reads, "The 5 fundamental forces are not merely physical phenomena. They are computational primitives mapping directly to algorithms with provable optimality guarantees." This right here, this is the conceptual pivot point of the entire Gnosis framework. The text is brilliantly illustrating that physical forces and computational primitives are actually the exact same thing. So a physical race or a fold is just an algorithm executing optimally in space. Mind-blowing, right?
Let's dive into the actual mechanics of how these forces are mathematically proven. This brings us to another incredible section within the code, affectionately called the American frontier. Now, looking at this raw Lean 4 syntax, we shouldn't just see dry, boring code. No, in the world of Gnosis, these are living rules that govern reality. This section meticulously outlines the exact threshold where pure potential transforms into locked-in stability.
To really understand this frontier, we first need to define a term found right in the code: topological deficit. So a topological deficit is a mathematical state where your transport capacity is less than your path count. Think of it like a giant puzzle, or better yet, imagine having way too many diverging roads and just not enough cars to explore all of them. This creates what the code calls a positive deficit charge. The system is hungry, It hasn't reached its capacity threshold yet.
Comparing these two states really reveals the stark difference between chaos and stability in this framework. In the pre-frontier state, you have this chaotic, exploring system. A single-stream transport sits right before the frontier, and because it can't cover all the paths, it carries that positive deficit we just talked about. But the post-frontier state is where the magic of convergence happens. Here, the frontier stream count perfectly matches the path count. It covers the whole shebang. And because of this perfect match, the topological deficit violently closes down to exactly 0.
So this naturally leads us to a pretty critical question. We know what happens at the frontier. The deficit drops to zero. But what happens once the frontier is actually reached? What if you keep pushing past that boundary? Like, what happens if you just keep adding more and more capacity to a system that is already perfectly matched?
Well, the code answers this with a rock-solid mathematical guarantee. Check out this theorem. Post-frontier has no positive deficit. The logic here dictates that once that frontier is reached, adding more streams simply cannot create a positive deficit. If you oversaturate the system with way more transport capacity than paths available, it doesn't mathematically break that zero deficit stability. Actually, the deficit remains non-positive. You have permanently, provably solved the hunger of that topological space.
Let's zoom back out to the macro level for just a second. Why does all this incredibly intricate math about frontiers and deficits even matter? Well, it matters because of this one powerful phrase found throughout the Gnosis ledger: zero sorries, zero axioms. Now, if you aren't familiar, in Lean 4 programming, a sorry is essentially a cheat code. It's a way for a programmer to tell the compiler, hey, trust me, this is true, even if I haven't proven it yet. But Gnosis, it has absolutely none of that. Zero. This single file's total lack of unproven assumptions guarantees that its optimal computation is objectively, mathematically true. And that rigorous proof cascades across the entire 688-file ledger.
Which brings us to the broader, almost poetic philosophy of the Gnosis universe. The source material states, the void is the maximum entropy reservoir of untaken choices. I just love that. Every single untested hypothesis, every untaken path, every computational option you didn't choose simply lives inside this void. The code also refers to it as the Betty manifold, which is essentially this mathematical space of unclosed loops and potentials. It's just a massive reservoir, waiting to be pulled into reality through those 5 computational forces we discussed earlier.
So, consider this final thought as we wrap things up today. If algorithms are literal physical forces, if a fork, a race, or a fold are functionally no different than gravity or electromagnetism, and if formal machine-checked logic dictates the exact capacity of our universe, well, how might this topological mathematics fundamentally redefine our very understanding of physical reality? The Gnosis ledger heavily implies that math isn't just describing the universe, it is the universe executing its code. Pretty mind-bending stuff. Thank you so much for exploring this massive logical manifold with me today. Keep questioning the code.